It's go time. Woo, let the explosion continue. The final day of Nurses Week. What a week we've had here. And I'm here with Patty. Patty, what is up from Medical Solutions?
Oh, well, we're moving and shaking always. We are in the process of growing and expanding, and everything's running fast.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so Patty, before we both are from Southwestern PA, but there's something else that we have a real tie knot to. Do you know what it is? Did you look at my profile?
No.
Okay, you ready for this?
Yes.
I'm part of the We Are.
Penn State.
You know it, girl. Yes.
Love it.
So now you are my sister for life. You know that. See, I got to tell everybody out there, you know what? See, when you say Penn State, Patty, tell people out there that we will embrace you, hug you. Did you see the expression you had as soon as I said Penn State? It's like, we are a family. I don't care where you live at or if you never met anybody. You know, as soon as you go somewhere, it could be in Mexico, and you say, from Penn State, it's like,
You know
family.
someone. Yes. And I have a luggage tag on and I do a lot of traveling, being in the travel industry, but I have a luggage tag from Penn State, and I do not get on an airplane that somebody says we are. And it's like, okay, it just starts an entire conversation.
It does. Love it. Love it. And by the way, we have a great football team, and hopefully next year we can make it to the big dance. So I have to say.
I would love that.
All right, Patty. So we got a deep dive in for Nurses Week here. This is so exciting. And I got to tell you, I'm very impressed. I did some research on you. I mean, 35 years, you know, you've done this, you know, right? Is that about, am I right?
More. A little over.
A little more. Oh, okay.
A little more than that now, too.
Wow, that's awesome. So, okay, so let's break it down. I've done this all week with everybody. I want to go from like day one, you know, you're going into nursing, you know, from Penn State, then you went to a couple other schools, I believe. And then, you know, let's take us fast forward to like what's going on now, because I believe when you started as a nurse, there was a lot of paper files. There was no computers and all this stuff. I mean, there might have been, but it was that DOS, right? The green, ugly screen with the cursor blinks.
Yeah, so definitely everything was paper. And I was one of those who loved my flow sheets, I was passionate about it. I couldn't even imagine how we could go to an electronic medical record, was active in our practice council. And so I was chosen to be one of the nurses to look at the different systems. And as I saw it a little bit more, I was a little bit more interested, but I have to tell you, I just was panic stricken about moving from the flow sheet to going to an electronic medical record. I was one of those nurses.
I love it. So when you start out, what was your specialty right off the bat?
Oh, I was pediatrics my entire career. I've worked in pediatrics, PICU. I was a maternal child float for 7 years. I managed in pediatrics, peds oncology. Then I took on a peds oncology unit. Everything children's, I loved it. One of my least favorite was child psych. I felt like a fish out of water every time they called me to tell me that's where I was going.
I got to tell you, the kids, I mean, touching. Can you just throw, I mean, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Do you have a story that sticks out in your head that like was like an inspiring story of over the years?
Inspiring or most heart-wrenching?
Heartbreaking. Give me something that you've like, you know, experienced, because this whole week I've really learned that like a lot of this work that you guys do, you take it home with you at night. You can't turn this off.
For sure. So I left, I'll tell you my story that was most heart-wrenching first. I had a little boy that I used to take care of, and I loved this little boy. He always had his bald head. It was when I was a maternal child float. He was an oncology patient. His mother was incarcerated, and his grandfather was a pastor, and his grandparents were raising him. And everyone loved this boy. He'd come onto the unit, and he could not wait to pee in the cup. We used to take urine samples as soon as they'd get there, and he'd walk onto the unit, and he'd say, "Patty, I need to pee in the cup." And he didn't always have to pee, but he loved this. He thought it was the best thing ever. Well, you took care of him for 2.5 years. And on the day that my daughter was born, I worked the night before and I went,
Mhm.
ended up going into labor, ended up having a C-section that day. And she was not well. So she went to the NICU. And on my way up through, everybody looked at me like they had seen a ghost. And he passed away on the day that
Ah,
he was born. It was the most heart-wrenching. It was the best of days, but I couldn't even be excited because he had passed. And it was the most heart-wrenching day for me. As I got up,
ah.
everybody was, don't tell her, don't tell her. But somebody did tell me, and it just broke my heart. For a day and a half, I could not think about anything but the fact that we lost this little boy.
That is so sad. So I gotta tell you, like, so you really get attached to some of these families and these kids big time because
For sure. For sure. It is one of these things that we always talked about, how we have to separate and boundaries. Boundaries are big in pediatrics because you have to be able to say when you make the relationship, because you're the nurse and they're the patient, that's where that boundary begins. But that is, I'd be crazy to tell you that I think that by me saying that it makes any other difference.
no,
But
we're human.
yes,
We have a
we're
heart,
human.
right? If you have a heart, how do you separate that? You can't.
Mhm. That's right. That's
So
right.
how long were you in nursing before you converted over to the I call it the recruiting staffing world?
Oh my. So my entire career was in a hospital until November of 2022. That's when I joined Medical Solutions. My focus for several years was actually in staffing in a hospital setting. So starting
Okay.
at the central staffing office, working in and leading float pools, central staffing, doing things like that. And I loved scheduling. I loved that part of my role, not only as a manager, but even when we did self scheduling, I thought that was fun as a staff nurse.
Yeah.
So those were things that really I was driven by. I always budgeted as a leader in Children's Hospital, always had travelers in my organization. You rely on them when you have seasonal staffing needs like that. It's cheaper to do a traveler than to hire somebody to do it all year long. So I always had a budget with travelers on my unit. So that
Hmm.
was part of a passion for me. Um, was part of signing the first MSP in my first organization,
You
and
go, girl.
it was something that I was very accustomed to, but never thought I would leave my hospital from that perspective of being the chief nurse at the time in an academic medical center here in Charleston, South Carolina. It was, you were at war during COVID. That whole team that you were leading, you felt like you were in war against COVID,
Yeah,
truly.
let's deep dive into that real quick here before we slide into the staffing recruiting. During COVID, I mean, tell me about it. I mean, from what I understand, nurses were working like 100 hours a week. Like you were like in like you said, a war zone. Like, you didn't go home. Tell me about that and tell me about the precautions of going home to your family because you're in an environment where possibly you could get COVID. I mean, you're there around all these,
Mhm.
sick people. So tell me.
Yeah, that it was awful. I'd never, ever, ever want to lead through that again. It was by
Oh,
far the hardest leader. As a leader, it was the hardest time to lead. It was the hardest time to support your team. There were times when individuals, while I was like leader rounding, they would say to me, I'm going to go travel, or I have to step away because my children have to be homeschooled practically. If you think about all the transitions that were taking place, we were asking them to do extra hours. We were asking them to give 110% at home. Here, knowing that their home life, they had all these other things that were happening. I think about my daughter my daughter is a teacher, and she was a teacher during the time, and how hard it was on their side trying to get all these elementary school kids up online, how to get them to learn in an environment that was completely remote. We know what the span of their attention span is with a first grader or a second grader. So parents felt like they had to be there all the time. They were doing so much of the teaching themselves, in essence, the homework and helping leading them. And my team would say to me, I can't do this. We started getting very creative. We started our weekend option program all over again to let nurses lead into that. We were getting creative where we were doing shorter shifts. We were doing everything we could. We did a We Want You Back campaign, bringing back retired nurses. I met with the Citadel. I met with every college and said,
Wow.
if you have any professors who aren't teaching now, we'll take school nurses in the high schools, in the middle schools. Met with them and said, would you come back? My education department was phenomenal. They were certifying nurses and training them in real time to be a helping set of hands on the units. We had different layers of, you could be an administrator and come and help us empty trash, pass out trays, do it, anything. Like, we were literally pivoting at any time. But I think the hardest part too is there weren't rules. Like, we were used to always working in a very highly regulated,
Yeah.
rules-based place. This was a time when you're fighting to get PPE. You're changing on the dime. Some days they changed policies and procedures because we were learning as we were going. So they were changing things every day. And so it was really hard. How do you cascade that to 3,500 nurses? How do you cascade that to all the faculty members that are working at the bedside? How do you help, every tech, every support service individual learning what was happening? It was really tough.
I could imagine that, Patty. And then I think now, I mean, what's your take on the nurses shortage right now? Do you think that's from post-COVID? Because people just, from what I understand and just reading the news, is like a lot of people after COVID, they're like, I'm out of here. I'm done with nursing because it just, that 2 years just wore them out.
Yeah. And that was the hard part. We didn't know when was this going to end? That, normally you go in and you're in a disaster mode. It's a hurricane, it's a snowstorm. When I lived in Pennsylvania, whatever that disaster was, you knew there was an end. Even when it was a massive trauma, a busload of people are coming in, there's an end in sight. We didn't know. We didn't know when the end in sight was. So it was really, really difficult to lead during that time, being in that mode. So a lot of people were leaving in different times in their career for different reasons, early retirements, all of those things that we saw. And then we were successful because we had nursing programs that we worked with so closely, and we opened the door a lot faster, I think, than a lot of places did. We did have good contracts for PPE, and we were very successful there in getting them. So we opened the door faster than I know a lot of my colleagues felt comfortable doing, and had nursing students at the bedside. But recognizing, you pay me now or you pay me later, we're going to be in trouble with this new group of cohorts of nurses who are only getting trained in a simulation lab. So that's why we decided to bring them back. And even if they weren't able to function as a student, like, we were allowing students to come in, but they were actually in a very short period of time. We had them come in as techs. We opened up the door. We made an evergreen kind of posting, and we were taking student nurses from anywhere to whether they were doing mobility tech, whether they were doing technician work, working in the COVID tents. We wanted them to get exposure to patients, and we did it quickly.
And I could imagine, like, the patients, I mean, they just line out the door. I mean, after a while, there's no more beds. I mean, that's just something that I hope we never experience again. So then we go into the post. Let's go into that real quick, Patty. Like, what are you seeing now? Because, I mean, I got to tell you, a lot of nurses made a lot of money during that COVID time, and they're not making that now. It's totally a different lifestyle. Do you think that's why a shortage is, or do you think Gen Zs just don't want to get into nursing because it's so stressful and there's like different hours? What's your take on that?
Yeah, so I think honestly, I think the academic partners have truly outperformed what I would have thought they'd been able to do, and really graduated more cohorts, got more clinical sites, and were really successful in graduating individuals. What we did see in 2023, we started to stabilize pricing, you're right. The cost of traveling was not, it really wasn't what we had paid during 2021 and 2022. And in all fairness, hospitals couldn't have continued doing that. That's what I was struggling with, and what I was paying as a chief nurse. I couldn't continue at that pace. So it's more normalized, as you described. We are almost back to the pre-COVID dollars, and bill rates are about the same as what they were then. But we definitely onboarded a lot faster. We really didn't. They were graduating individuals that probably weren't prepared like anybody else had been prepared in times before COVID. And then, they also say they weren't quite prepared for the dynamics that happen on units somewhat. So those were the three big things, because in 2023, while we were really starting to see from a travel industry, the drops in postings, because they were starting to normalize their teams, which I was excited for personally, because that says we're getting back to a healthy space. In 2023, 30% of year one nurses left their first job. So that meant for every 3 nurses you hired, one of them was walking away from that. That was devastating. So in 2024, I see a lot more well-being, like places are really starting to pay attention to the well-being of their teammates. That includes incivility that takes place, like those nurses eating their young, saying this is not going to happen, and workplace violence. Nurses get kicked, punched, pushed, bitten, and we all walk away saying that's part of the job. They didn't know what they were doing. They had a brain bleed, or they have a mental illness. It still shouldn't be that our nurses and our care team at the front taking care of these patients are really going through this. And so organizations are really trying to draw the line in a different way. And I think that's going to help us rebuild this workforce. But if we're not paying attention to those things as an organization, we really have to, because that's what our nurses are telling us that left the bedside. They weren't prepared really for what they were going to see. Their onboarding was not what it should have been. And they saw a lot more incivility and workplace violence than they thought they should have and what they were prepared for.
You know what's, Patty? I never thought about that, the workforce violence, man. I never thought of that. It's part of the job, but it's not. I mean, somebody bites you or something like that, you could very fast get injured. You've probably seen it a lot of times, on your floors where nurses would get injured by a patient.
Yeah, it was devastating. Like when you would get the incident report, I was hooked into all incident reports that went to safety. And that was a great opportunity for us as C-suite to learn what was actually happening in our walls. And I thought that was the most critical. But watching that, sometimes it went right through you like a knife, watching and reading what had transpired. And then it's up to the nurse to decide whether or not they're going to prosecute. So then we put this moral distress on the nurse, because they have to figure out, well, this patient, do they really, I don't think it was intentional, or they were really struggling, or, as nurses, we go into this field because we want to take care of people, not because we want to see harm. And so that's that moral distress that we put on people every day when we're putting it back in their lap to say, do you want to prosecute? So we put infrastructures in place to say, we need to support them to make these kind of decisions. We need to be there with them. And help them think through the consequences. Because if we allow this to continue to happen, then it's going to continue to happen.
Yeah, it's just going to steamroll.
The next person.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Okay, to wrap things up, I know we got a hard stop soon, so I want to see what hot job, not nursing jobs, is there this year? You're on there, you see it. So if you're a nurse right now, a lot of people don't want to do bedside anymore. Is traveling nursing still hot, or which ones are rocking and rolling right now?
Well, I have to say travel nursing is still hot, but virtual nursing is where I see the biggest probably transformation. Looking at that, whether it's in virtual nurse supporting the med-surg, admissions, discharge, supporting the nursing case management, education, med reconciliation, doing all of those things that kind of take off the cognitive workload of the nurse at the bedside so that they can do the job they need to do. But then I'm also seeing virtual case management and remote patient monitoring and virtual sitting, those jobs are really taken off. And I think that we have to really think about how do we decrease the workload of the nurse at the bedside. And this is what I see a lot of people pivoting to. I was at AONL, which is our nurse leader program. That it's a conference that took place in April, and they shared that 34% of hospitals have virtual nursing in place right now, and 38% of CNOs said it's on their roadmap for this year. So that's a pretty big number for us to ignore. I think that's where we're seeing a big influx. So
I've never thought of the virtual nurse. The AI is here in nursing. You don't think AI in nursing, but now it is.
Yes, and I think it's gonna keep more seasoned nurses in nursing as well, because you really do need a very seasoned nurse, because when we do our assessments, we always have the ability to touch the patient. And that is the most critical part to what we learn, how we learn to assess a patient. We're taking that completely away. So you need somebody who's very expert in their field and experienced. And that's really what I think this is going to help keep nurses at the bedside longer.
I love it because when you're a nurse, you have so many different avenues. I mean, you go into staffing, recruiting, bedside, whatever, traveling. So, I mean, of all professions, you have like unlimited options.
So true. That's why I'm a nurse. I've done a ton of different things in my career, and every one of them I wouldn't have said I planned. They just kind of evolve. They happen. They show up for you, and if you're willing to take the leap and you're willing to try something new, this is it's the best profession. Truly, it's the best profession.
It is the best profession. And before we go, I give a shout out to our sponsor here, Advance Partners. They put the fun in funding. If you need funding, you need to call Advance Partners. Hey, Patty, thank you so much for coming on and giving this little, presentation here of nursing. I love it. I got to bring you back for a roundtable sometime to deep dive into this because I'm so excited. Do you have any shout outs before we get off here?
I just want to say Happy Nurses Week as we conclude this week. I literally, every nurse I've ever met, and being able to support nurses in this travel industry, I'm getting to meet a ton of different people with a lot of different backgrounds and stories to share. But this by far is the best profession. And Happy Nurses Week to all of you who chose this profession and continue to do it day in and day out, whether you're leading a group, whether you are taking care of patients at the bedside, whether you're doing this virtually for nurses. Happy Nurses Week.
There it is. And we love you, nurses. That's a wrap for Nurses Week till next year. Hey, Patty, thank you so much. And we'll see y'all soon. Take care.
Take care.